Justin. I'm Brett Hauber from Pfizer, Worldwide Research Development and Medical. And I'm going to talk about points to consider for method selection. So choosing the correct method in any situation isn't always easy because there are many factors that go into that decision. Throughout the Prefer project, the issue of guidance on which method to choose has come up a number of times from both project members, external advisors, and stakeholders. However, the reality is that providing specific guidance in the form of a decision algorithm is not realistic because designing and implementing a patient preference study does not allow for a cookbook process. Therefore, we recommend that researchers first identify which methods are capable of providing the information necessary to answer the underlying research question based on methodological considerations, and then to assess which of those methods is most appropriate given the characteristics of the patients and the feasibility of conducting the study given current resources. So with that in mind, we organize the points to consider for method selection into three categories: methodological factors, participant factors, and feasibility factors. Methodological factors are those describing the specific requirements and capabilities of the preference elicitation method itself. These factors specifically address the ability of the method to answer the research question. Patient or participant factors describe the interaction of the patient population in two ways. First, the ability of the individual patients to complete the task, which often has to do with the cognitive capability of the patient and the complexity of the preference elicitation task. And second, the ability of the patient population to provide the necessary information, which most often involves the size of, diversity of, and access to the patient population. And finally, feasibility factors relate to the expertise and resources of the study sponsor or the study team. And it is important to note that the methodological factors can also influence the suitability of a method for different types of participants and the feasibility of implementing the method given the resource constraints of the study sponsor. First, let's look at the participant and feasibility factors. As noted above, participant factors deal with both the ability of the patient to complete the exercise and the ability of the sample, primarily with regard to sample size, to provide enough information to implement the method. When it comes to feasibility, the primary question relates to the expertise needed to implement a method or the ability to access such expertise. It is also important to note that feasibility may be impacted by time and budget constraints. So earlier, I alluded to the fact that there is a hierarchy among the three categories of factors to consider. Researchers should first identify which methods are capable of providing the information necessary to answer the research question based on the methodological considerations. Then, patient and feasibility factors come into play and can help identify which among the possible methods is most appropriate in a specific situation. So for the remainder of this presentation, I will focus on how the methodological factors can be applied to 5 commonly used methods that were included in the EMA qualification briefing book. These methods are the discrete choice experiment, including best worst scaling case 3, best worst scaling case 1, best worst scaling case 2, threshold technique, and swing weighting. We evaluated the 5 methods against 8 methodological points to consider. First, some methods are designed primarily to provide sample level estimates, while others start with the individual level estimates and aggregate up to get sample level estimates. Second, we want to know, does the method allow us to control for or test for preference heterogeneity and to identify its sources? The third point relates to the minimum required sample size. Fourth, of all of the 5 methods under consideration, we know that they can estimate preferences for individual attributes, but they differ in the number of attributes that they can address. Fifth, some methods focus on preferences for attributes or a single range for each attribute, while others focus on the preferences for changes in attributes across multiple levels. Sixth, some methods primarily estimate relative importance and and trade-offs can be inferred based on relative importance. And some methods do this the other way around. They first estimate the trade-offs among attributes and then use that information to calculate the relative importance of the attributes. Seventh, some methods, like the DCE, directly elicit trade-offs among multiple attributes simultaneously. And that's one of the big advantages of a discrete choice experiment. However, methods such as the threshold technique estimate trade-offs among pairs of attributes. And finally, some methods can account for interaction effects among attributes, while others cannot. So we evaluated each of the 5 methods along those 8 points to consider. And we can see here that DCEs primarily provide sample level estimates, although some of the estimations allow you to infer or recover individual level estimates from the sample level estimates. So here we have sample, and then we have here the both for the ones that allow us to start with the individual level estimates and then aggregate up. So in this case, the threshold technique estimates a single number or interval for each pairwise trade-off for each individual, and then the sample means are a function of the individual level estimates. For best-worst scaling 1 and 2, simple methods can be used to recover individual level estimates, or the data can be analyzed at the sample level. And for swing weighting, each respondent provides a unique set of weights, which can then be aggregated to calculate weights for the sample as a whole. All 5 methods can be used to address preference heterogeneity, but they differ in the ways in which it is addressed. Sample size is a difficult subject because the required sample size depends on more than just the method. So the assessment for each method is somewhat vague. In general, however, DCEs require the largest sample sizes, and swing weighting probably requires the smallest sample size. And as previously noted, all methods can elicit preferences for individual attributes, but the number of attributes that each can accommodate varies. In general, discrete choice experiments and best-worst scaling case 2, because they are profile-based methods, tend to be more limited in the number of attributes that they can accommodate. But you can see here, this is somewhat vague because we don't have hard and fast rules on the numbers of attributes that can be accommodated by any method. When we look at the remaining 4 points to consider, in general, best-worst scaling case 1, threshold, and swing weighting estimate preferences for each attribute or a single change in the levels of each attribute. In contrast, discrete choice experiments and best-worst scaling case 2, again, because they are profile methods, almost always elicit preferences for more than 2 levels of each attribute. DCE and threshold technique tend to estimate the rates of trade-off first and then use that information to calculate relative importance, whereas swing weighting and best-worst scaling 1 tend to do it the other way around. However, DCE can be used to estimate multiple trade-offs simultaneously, and the threshold technique tends to estimate one trade-off at a time. Best-worst scaling 2 is a unique case because it considers multiple attributes in a profile, like a discrete choice experiment, but it considers only one profile at a time, unlike a discrete choice experiment. So on the one hand, it appears to provide estimates of relative importance rather than trade-offs, like the best-worst scaling case 1, but it does so more. It does allow for multiple levels or a set of attributes simultaneously, like a DCE. So this one is a little unique. And finally, because they consider simultaneous trade-offs among a set of attributes, discrete choice experiments and best-worst scaling 2 can easily account for interaction effects, while the other methods cannot. So, if there's only one thing that people take from this presentation, I would like it to be that even with a small set of methods, and these are just the 5 common methods that are described in the EMA qualification briefing book, the performance of each method on the methodological factors is not entirely unambiguous. While we can provide some general ideas, the performance of a specific method on methodological grounds alone needs to be considered on a case-by-case basis. So with that in mind, it is important to understand that there are multiple patient preference methods available. And when choosing a method, the first task should be to determine which method or methods can address your research question. Sometimes this exercise leads you to a single method, But most often, there are multiple methods that could provide the information that you need. In all cases, once you've identified the potential methods, you should consider participant and feasibility factors. However, throughout the process, the choice of method should always be guided on what will provide the right level of evidence for the decision maker. So with that, I will turn it over to our next section.